Welcome everyone to our official start of the webinar tonight. A warm welcome to today's Fireside Chat titled Sold, What's Next? A Founder's Mindset Post-Exit. Our guest for this event is Harprem Prem Doowa, currently CDO and head of Insurtech-Exchange at Bolttech and former CEO and co-founder of Frank & Co. Before starting Frank & Co., Prem was working in the e-commerce space and co-founded the startups What's New and Moxie. The lessons he learned from selling products online helped him to start the successful online distribution platform Frank & Co. in 2016, which was fully acquired in 2019. Today, Frank & Co. is part of Pacific Century Group's new insurtech venture, Bolttech, and is working closely with the group insurer FWD. The acquisition is one of the first of an insurtech startup by a conglomerate in Southeast Asia, leading to the platform originally developed by Frank & Co. to be rolled out across the region within the Bolttech ecosystem. Welcome, Prem, to the Fireside Chat.
Thanks so much for having me here. I hope you guys can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can. Yeah. So why don't we start it off with a short look into your personal biography. How did you came to be an entrepreneur? What perpetuated your move from banking into entrepreneurship?
To be honest, I always knew I wanted to do something on my own. The word entrepreneur doesn't really, it just sort of got added on later. If you look back, 50, 60 years, 100 years, anyone that started a business was just a SME. Nobody actually had the word startup or entrepreneur. So, just following into my family's footsteps, I guess, because my family migrated from India to Thailand almost 100 years ago. From my great-grandfather's time, and when he came to Thailand, he didn't come with much, so he started from scratch, and that's, I guess, was his entrepreneurial journey. So my granddad worked under the same business, and my dad and my uncles work under the same business as well. They've sort of been carrying that forward. So for them, in my eyes, they've always been entrepreneurs and they've always been business owners, and that's what I wanted to do. So I wanted to become the boss, essentially, a business owner, and do it that way.
Great. So can you, your first endeavor was in the consumer market with an online platform for, I read that you started to launch a social network for pets before pivoting, right? So how did you get to the point to...
Look, that's a really funny story. So when I finished my banking stint in 2010, I graduated from Sasin. I went to Sasin first, graduated 2012? Yeah, 2012. And right after that, towards the end of 2012, before I even got the whole graduation ceremony and everything else like that, there was a startup weekend at Aim's house. And this is Hubba Aim. And back then, he was, Hubba was just a house in Ecommerce. And that's where all the people went for anything startup. And it was the second startup weekend ever in Thailand. So I went there not knowing anybody, not knowing anything at all, but I've known Aim for a long time because he's a high school friend. So I tried it out, and interestingly enough, what ended up happening was that I met a bunch of people that were really cool. First time meeting them, and then we had an icebreaker event, and during the icebreaker event, they asked us to, they gave us 2 random words, and with those 2 random words, they asked us to come up with an idea to, as an icebreaker event, just to pitch. So the 2 words that we got was fluffy and chin. So, fluffy chin. And you're like, okay, what can you do with fluffy and chin? No, you're like, some grooming tool, beard, for some reason it just connected to a goat. And from a goat, it went to animals. And we're like, let's do something around animals and call it fluffy. So then we started doing a social media network around pets. So we pitched that. And then we sort of ran with it throughout the startup weekend idea. So little did I know, for a startup weekend, most people actually go in with an idea and they're actually trying to look for developers, artists, graphic designers, business development, or some other people to come in and into their idea and then develop it during the startup weekend and pitch it to investors. I didn't know that. I went in with no idea. I went in with no people that I knew before. So I just went in with the concept of let's just meet people. The idea came about in that icebreaker event. we ran with that idea throughout the 3 days. And this startup weekend back then was intense. It was fun because 3 days, 3 nights, you pretty much slept at the house. You know, you showered at the house, you ate at the house, you did everything there. You didn't go home, you didn't go out unless you wanted to validate the idea or something along the lines of that. By the end of it, I pitched the idea, and on the board, the judges was Paul from Ecommerce, and back then he was doing Ardent Capital, and they just exited from Ensogo. So Ecommerce hadn't started yet, and Paul was very impressed by my pitch. We came in second place. Unfortunately, we didn't come in first, but not bad for a first timer pitching an event like that. And then following weekend, there was something used to be called Web Wednesdays, which was done at like RCA, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so Web Wednesday was a concept of let's get everyone who's a web designer or anything into IT or related, again, startups. Let's just go have drinks together at RCA. So went there, randomly walked in, met a random gentleman called Adrian, and he turns out to be, he's from Australia. I graduated from Australia, so we started talking. He also went to the same university. He's about 20 years older than I am, but who cares? So it turns out Adrian and Paul are board of directors of Ardent Capital, both running the same fund. So Adrian goes back and tells the rest of the Ardent group that, oh, I met this guy at Startup Weekend. He seems really nice. And then Paul's like, oh, this is the guy that pitched to me at Startup Weekend. And then it's just sort of like connected. And they called me into their office and said, look, we want to do something in the pet space. We like your idea. Let's work together. And that's how it happened. And the offer I got, off a PowerPoint presentation for a $50,000 investment at a $100,000 valuation. And I'm like, sure.
It's amazing. It's amazing. It shows like how the idea and passion and personality, which we will talk later on, like team about, makes an impact. So why don't we shift gears a little bit and go into like the route of Frank and Co. you did go into. Can you give us, first of all, for us Insurtech newbies, can you introduce the Insurtech space a little bit for us, maybe on a global level and then specifically Thailand at the time?
Yeah, I mean, Insurtech is just a fancy word for taking insurance and applying technology to it, right? Honestly, it is something that a lot of people have been trying to crack for a while now. The reason I got into the space at all was because I wanted to come off of e-commerce and applied my skills on how to sell online, and everything I learned at developing Petloft, Venby, Moxie, and Orami. How I developed that from scratch to all the way to a $50 million valuation at one point, to apply that to another industry. And I saw that, I sort of saw the trend in other countries that was happening. The first trend of products to go online was generally e-commerce products. The second trend of products to go online was not insurance, but financial products. But within the financial product field, there's a lot of variety availability. So I looked at insurance and said, you know what? It's actually a great opportunity here because it's untapped and untouched. So that's where I sit. So I'm like, how do I implement now? How do I take everything I learned on how to sell a physical product online, and go sell this service online? And look, the Insurtech, it's fairly young in Thailand. I would say it's no more than 6 years old, and it's honestly pioneered by a few, industry, few people. Like, for example, Direct Asia, which is arguably the first company that came on board. Before that, you also had like Ask Hanuman, which is now Rabbit Finance or Rabbit Care. You also have Ruchai, which is just a year older than we were when we started Frank. So a few companies there, but again, very early days. So clearly, when you have competitors coming into space, so you have people who are interested in opening companies in this space, you're on the right spot, especially when it's earlier on. There are people who are trying to innovate and do something different there. So that's how I started. Insurance is a massive market. Thailand is actually really, really large for insurance, but it's still very much underinsured. We only spend about 2.5% to 3% of the GDP on insurance overall. And there are two sides of insurance. There's the general insurance space and life insurance space. So life insurance is much larger, almost 2-3 times larger than general insurance. But general insurance is what most of us are used to, because that includes things like travel insurance, car insurance, house insurance, accident, and things like that. So the types of products that we buy on a yearly basis, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So what made you wanting to do the jump into that sector? What was the opportunity you saw specifically, and what were the early lessons learned of this work?
The idea was that on the e-commerce side, there were like let's say 4 or 5 things that I had to constantly worry about, right? So I had to worry about customer service, I had to worry about the technology side, I had to worry about the marketing side, but I also had to worry about the logistics side as well as the inventory side. So those are like the 5 basic things they have to worry about in e-commerce. On the insurance side, I did not have to worry about logistics or inventory anymore. So that's a huge cash savings. And on top of that, the margins on the insurance side were also a lot higher. E-commerce side margins are actually quite low. On average, when you're selling a product, you're making 7 to 10% margins compared to insurance, which is like 25 to 45 potentially. So that's one thing. The other aspect was that I always liked an industry where once I acquire a customer, I'm able to retain them by doing things that are stickier. Let's put it that way. E-commerce, a lot of it's about price, because if you're selling an iPhone, I can buy that same iPhone from Lazada, Shopee, 11th Street, JD Central, wherever. It's the same phone. I'm getting the same product. But for for insurance, service matters a lot. So yes, I can compare prices from different insurance companies, but service matters a lot as well as how I take care of customers, as well as the technology in the platform. So one was, being able to focus on fewer things. I only had to focus on customer service. I had to focus on technology. I had to focus on the marketing. So allow me to, spend less of my time focusing on more key important things. And the other side was to develop a platform that could automate this industry was another one of the key focus that really made me jump ship. I realized that in e-commerce, you could sell 24 hours 7 days a week. Your website is always on. You always have people coming to site. You have sales at 2 a.m. and people will come in and buy. uh, on the insurance side back then, it was only open from 9 to 6, because you always required somebody to help you through the journey, like a physical human being to talk to you, or an agent to meet you to sign documents and things like that. So insurance sales were pretty much non-existent from in the late in the evenings to the AM. I wanted to change that. I wanted to apply that e-commerce logic of selling 24 hours 7 days a week 365 to insurance as well. So a lot of it had to be built around I saw an opportunity to build a very strong platform there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Um, in our knowledge nugget, you mentioned try to get traction as fast as possible, which implies that you need to validate your assumptions to a certain extent. Talk to us a little bit about how you did that with your first assumptions. What were they, and how did you get to validate them to generate this product market fit?
It happens over time, right? It's nothing that happens. I mean, honestly, the first version of our platform compared to now is completely different. It's like an evolution, and it keeps getting building on itself. So initially, we were under the the concept of, let's look at 80-20 rule. 80% of the market, sorry, 70% of the market is car insurance. So we want to focus only on car insurance. Do we want to go to every insurance company and get all their car insurance and be a marketplace? No. Initially, my concept was, let's work with only one partner, get the best deal from that partner, and try to sell the best car insurance possible. We tried that. It worked. So it worked for a while, but we sort of saw very quickly that there was a glass ceiling that we could not grow past a certain level of point. And then we had to evolve. How do we even get to that glass ceiling point? Honestly, there are a lot of tools available that we used. Talk to your customers is the best advice that I could always give. So initially, we tried to sell online as much as possible, but it didn't work. So we realized very, very quickly we had to build a call center. And once we built the call center, I pretty much talked to customers every day for at least 3 hours a day as a salesperson myself, to try to understand what the customers were looking for, what experiences they had on our platform, how when they were dropping leads, did they drop leads properly? Did they did they want to fill more information? Did they want to see the prices faster? What information were they comfortable with giving, not comfortable with giving? What information do we need to give them a price as quickly as possible? Things like that. So we kept evolving, but it all came from understanding who the customer was and speaking to the customers on a daily basis, so that we could continually tweak the platform to meet their needs.
Mm-hmm. Great, great. Can you share a little bit about like the metrics? Because I mean, you must have had some sort of metrics to measure your direct input and customer retention or lifetime value or such things.
Back then, to be honest, no lifetime value. No, it was purely about the conversion funnel. So I was really focused on, you know, getting traffic to your website. Honestly, it's not very difficult. If you have the budget to spend on marketing on Facebook and Google, you can drive traffic. But once you drive that traffic, what happens? So it's the conversion funnel that really matters, right? What happens to those sessions that hit your website? How do they convert? What are they clicking on? So in the beginning, we implemented tools that allowed us to track customers' mouse flows on the platform to see where the customers are surfing, what they were clicking on, what they were scrolling on, what they were doing, what they were spending time most. So we split this up into qualitative and quantitative metrics, right? Qualitative metrics are, we came from focus groups. We actually called our customers into the office. We gave them the 1,000 baht voucher, 2,000 baht voucher. It didn't matter. We called them at 5 at a time to come in. We sat them in front of a computer. We put a GoPro on the camera, recorded their facial expressions, as well as recorded what they were looking at on the screens, and started seeing what they were doing and saw where they were getting signed. Sometimes it's very small tells. When you ask the Thai customer, I can tell you right now, most Thai customers are not going to be fronting, they're not going to be daring enough to tell you, oh, this is wrong with your website, that's wrong with your website. They're going to be like, no, it was okay. No, it was all right. Yeah, it was good. No, it looks nice. But it's the small nuances, like how long they say ums for, or when they're scrolling, are they squinting at a certain section? Are they scrolling up and down? Are they typing it? Are they deleting it again and again? Those kind of things all matter on how the customers are surfing the web and how we have to tweak the platform. That was on the qualitative side. On the quantitative side, it was all Google analytical data as well as mouse flow data. So looking at heat maps of where customers were getting stuck, looking at what they were clicking through, how many clicks they were going through, what was the drop-off rate, where were they dropping off, how long did they spend on the site, what they were looking at before. So tracking their cookies and tracking their UTMs to see what their journey was before they landed on our platform. Combine both of these together and continuously improving and then redoing the cycle again and again to you sort of have it sort of becomes like a science. And then once it becomes a science, you get the most optimal UI UX. And that's never optimal for too long. It just means that it's optimal for a certain period of time. Then you got to repeat the cycle again to keep tweaking it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. I think this is something to take away for any business, right? The customer centricity, learning from the customer, but also realizing that the fit is not something static, which you can carry forward without constantly validating it and manifesting that you are actually on the right track. So in all of this, team plays a lot of importance, right? You can't do this all by yourself. You cannot be on the customer line 24/7. You mentioned you spend 3 hours every day, which is considerable amount of time. But can you talk to us a little bit about the importance of team, your philosophy with team, and what it entails for you to grow a functioning team for the growth of the company?
Yeah, I mean, I very, very much believe in team because I'm just one person. There's only so much I can do. I have to rely on my team to get a lot of the things done. And I need to be able to trust them. So when I'm looking to hire somebody, I'm looking, there's some aspects of their skills, yes, but I'm looking for their experience. I'm looking for how they overcame adversity, and I'm looking for their personality, whether I can actually get along with them or not. I'm looking for how open and how daring they are and how willing they are to try different things. Like I have a saying in Thai, "Mai long, mai lu," which is like, if you don't try it, you're never gonna know. And I always tell my team to do that. And it's really, really hard to get traditional people who work in corporates or for insurance companies to think that way because they're not trained that way. They're not used to thinking that way. So I end up hiring a lot of young people from e-commerce industries and from other industries other than insurance to work from us because I always figured, look, I can always teach them about the product. You can go to courses and you can take them to, seminars or things like that to learn about the insurance product themselves. But you can't teach them that mindset. You can't teach them that ability to try or daringness to willingness to try. That's something that is either they have it or they don't have it. That's something that's in their personality. So personality is one really big things. Some of the things that I used to do before was when I used to hire a salesperson or a business development manager, someone who had to go and meet other partners to try to get them to partner with us to drive traffic to our platform for the purpose of selling insurance, I would tell them upfront right there and then that I don't think they're suited for it because I wanted to see how they would react. I mean, if you're a salesperson, you're going to go pitch to people all day and all night. You better get used to rejection. So if I'm rejecting you in this interview, how are you going to react to that? How are you going to try to sell? No, I can do this. No, give me a chance. Or where do you think I went off and on to try to activate that conversation further? So most salespeople failed that particular test, because it was a telltale sign for me to see how they thought, what they would do in a case of actual rejection, and it just matched the requirements that I needed for that particular job. Now, obviously, I can't do that for every single role, right? If I do that for a development role, like for example, a coder, I can't just say, I'm sorry, I don't think you're suited. They just be like, okay, no problems, and they're gonna walk out, because their job is not to fight back with me on that sort of sense. Their job is to develop, so they have different tests for that. When it came on the marketing side, I need somebody who's very analytical, who looked at data all the time and understood how performance marketing works. So we created a test, like an actual questionnaire test, that allowed them to do calculations and understand the theories and numbers, and gave them certain scenarios behind what to do, what equals what. So things like that. And it's never fixed, but if you had to sum it all down, it always came to whether I felt that person's personality would match my personality or not, in terms of how they could work with me as a person. Skills I could always teach them, but the personality is a little bit harder to change.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's shift gears again from the people focus to the company focus, and a little bit more maybe going towards the exit and post-exit topic of our today's chat. Let's start with the funding story. Can you share with us a little bit, if you can, the story of the different experiences throughout the funding rounds of Frank & Co, and maybe the insight of like what capital sources did you need, and what came with it?
Yeah, so on the funding side, right? Actually, to be honest, I think I got really lucky. There was a group called Noah Founders, and they wanted to invest and build in the insurtech space in Thailand. And I got introduced to them through a mutual friend. And when it just sort of clicked, and we are like, you know what, let's do this together. And then they actually helped me on the fundraising side quite a bit as well. So we closed raised fundraising from Noah Founders as well as Pacific Century Group, and both of those just it was like a perfect alignment of the stars, so to speak. And I just sort of like, the opportunity was there for like a month period, and if I didn't grab that opportunity at that exact point in time, it would have been gone. And I just sort of took it. And I think a lot of it is coming down. It boils down to the opportunity is always there for a lot of us. It's just whether we have the guts to grab it at that particular point in time or not. Pitching the idea was not that difficult at all, because to an investor that was already looking to invest in the space, it was perfect. It was a perfect alignment. Now, in hindsight, which should I have pitched to other investors? Yes, I should have, because going with the first investor you see, again, you have to understand as well, right? Getting funding, it's for a startup, it's not always easy. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of things, and sometimes you got to grind it out. So when you meet the first investor and they say like, let's do this, let's put in money and start growing this right away. We also have another investor who wants to put in money. You don't say no to that normally. You sort of say yes for that right away. But in hindsight now, I wish I took a little bit more time to meet other investors as well, to see if this idea could be fundraised by other investors, so to create a more diverse pool of board of directors, as opposed to just having a board of directors that knew each other from before, both of them, and sort of tends to overpower the founders. Let's put it that way.
So you mentioned already, like in a way that because this would be my next question, how did you meet the future acquirer? And you mentioned already their name.
Correct. So they already invested in us before, and what they wanted to do was, okay, instead of getting other investors in, they said, we're just gonna buy, we're gonna take the rest of the shares from everyone else and buy the whole thing out. And that's what happened. There was a question on the panel here: when did you decide the right time to exit, and what were the triggers? To be very honest, personally, as a founder, I didn't want to exit. I felt that we could have kept growing the business, but when we raised quite a bit of funding in the seed round, and I did not have the majority of the shares. So when you don't have the majority of the shares, even though you have a board seat or you have a say, it's called a tag along clause. When the majority want to sell, you have to tag along with that, and that's what ended up happening.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So actually, this is like, how would you say then, like this process was for you, from a personal perspective as well as from a company perspective?
I think there's always two sides to every coin, right? Did I wish that I didn't exit? to exit right away. Yeah, I wish that. But then if you look at from the situation after COVID hit in 2020, right? Was I happy that I exited? Yes. In 2020, I was like, oh wow, I don't have to worry about not being able to pay my staff salary. I don't have to worry about not having the funding to grow. I don't have to worry about fundraising during time of COVID. That's a huge. It's very not easy at all. Let's put it that way. And let's take a look back in 2018 and 2019. How many funding stories we heard in Thailand? A lot of companies were raising funds, and what happened to all those VCs? What happened to all those funding entities in 2020? They all but disappeared. The number of funding, number of entities that got funded in 2020 shriveled down to you can count them on your hands, so to speak, or at least big ones. So um, there's always two sides to every coin. On one side, I wish that we held out a little bit more and got other investors involved as well. But at the same time, because we did exit it, we had the capabilities and the funding of PCG as well as the FWD group behind us to scale this company to a whole other level very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. From the outside, it seems to be like a very seamless flow of events, right? Like you start a business, you get the first funding, the future acquirer is already part of the group. So in a way, you get you mentioned you don't have the share majority, so you're not really in the driver's seat to drive that boat, but rather to tag along. So how was it for you, like exit, post-exit perception prior to the exit, and how was the reality after?
Look, post-exit, you're always going to have a couple of choices, right? Once you've exited the company, you stay with the company for a year or so to, transition over everything to the new company and things like that. That's standard. And then every entrepreneur is going to have this dilemma: like, do you stay with the company or do you leave with the company? One thing I realized very early on was that I have experience in building a company from 0 to 100, but I never had the experience from building a company from 100 to 1,000 or 10,000 people. Right? That's a whole different ballgame. FWD has 10,000 people all over the world. Bolttech, as a sister company of FWD, was looking to do that, and the people that they got on board at Bolttech level were top executives from top insurance companies, banks, and Prudential, AIG, etc. These guys were the tops in their fields as a large corporate, and I've never worked in a corporate before. So I wanted to, I was like, if I'm going to have to try this out and see how that works, this is the best place to do it. And that's where that was where my head was at. I wanted to see what the other side of the world looked like, and I also wanted to see how how corporates build companies compared to startups. They are very different. We are a lot more risk taking because we have a lot less to lose. Corporates are a lot more risk averse. In fact, majority of their decisions come from what are the risks. For us, majority of the decisions as a startup comes from like, oh, what's the opportunity there? We'll worry about the risk later. So different mindsets and different ways of understanding. Again, they have to do it that way because most of these companies are publicly listed companies. They have 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million shareholders that have to worry about that. That could sue them if they do something wrong. So it is a balance, and I sort of saw the other side and flip side of this. Now, if you ask me whether it's to my liking or to my personality or not, I would say probably not. I like shooting from the waist, more a little bit more cowboy, a little bit more aggressive, but that's just my personality. It's nothing to say that it's right or wrong, because I think both have their merits, and I think there needs to be a balance of both, because when you build a company in a corporate setting, there's a reason why corporates find it very hard to adapt to changing market environments or find it very hard to adapt to new trends. It's because of the structure and the processes and everything that they're set up to safeguard the company, also hinder the company's ability to turn quickly and adapt quickly. As a startup, you don't have those processes and safeguards, but you also have that ability. So there has to be a balance, and I'm trying to still figure out what that balance is.
Mm-hmm. So now that you had like this first look behind the curtain in a way, would there be anything you would have done prior, before being acquired, or during the growth phase of the company to adapt or anticipate the challenges which come after in the startup phase?
I would have gotten myself a professional coach much faster than I did. It would have helped me understand how to maneuver in a corporate a lot better, because my style of working in a startup environment did not match that of a corporate at all. So a lot of times I ended up butting heads or fighting battles that I shouldn't have been fighting at the corporate level.
Okay, and from a company perspective, like there's like you have the post-merger integration challenges at all and all bigger transactions or all bigger companies which absorb a smaller company or others, right? But like, is there from a startup perspective, would there be something in the company you can already instill, like lessons learned from this exit for the next one, for example?
I would think so. Like, for example, some of the things that really are useful advice is be like documentation. You know, like simple things that a startup can do that don't add additional cost, because startups have to worry about cost. Documentation of your contracts, your processes, your things like that, your systems that you use, what are their security levels, things like that. Keep those documented because they really help you get an idea. You know, upon exit, you pretty much have a data room, and when you share that data room, a lot of this data and a lot of these documentations really help you upon exit very well. So I learned that from my first startup. So when it came to this one, I had the workflows and documents. You know, you do them on a flow chart yourself, and it's fine as long as you have that. It's easy to explain to someone who just acquired you, like, look, this is how the operational process for sales works. This is how the financial process is. This is how a refund process. This is what a pick and pack process looks like. This is what a replenishment cycle process looks like. Things like that. All these processes were documented already and could be shared with investors very easily. So it really helped. Um, Obviously, from a larger company, they would expect to have these documents validated by, you know, hiring Grant Thornton, Ernest and Young, or some of those big four companies to come and audit you. As a startup, you would never do that. It's a waste of money for a startup to do that. So you don't do that, but at least you do what you can do by documenting all of this at a basic level, so that when that does happen from someone who's acquiring you, you can sort of hand that over and they have a head start. And they sort of look at you from a more professional view as well, as opposed to somebody who just says that this is a process, as opposed to someone who can show that this is a process.
Yeah, I think you're touching a little bit upon it, like the administrative process of selling also a company, including the due diligence. How much of how was that a new challenge for you?
It wasn't. I was very used to doing a data room because we did it at Pet Loft and Venby twice. So first, when we were acquiring Moxie, we did that once for them, and we saw all the data room that they had, all the mod. And then the second time, when we were merging with Bilna in Indonesia before we became Orami, that was the second time we had to prepare the data room and the structure of everything. So I sort of knew what a data room had to look like. I also knew like what you had to have in there, what you didn't have to have in there. So from day one, when I built Frank, I knew exactly, like, for example, when you're on your finance side, you have to have a chart of accounts that you have solidified from day one, so that you can always keep those from the beginning. You have data going back on what your chart of accounts look like, as well as where your expenses are and what you have to break them down into. Your contract data room, you have to have that in place. All your NDAs that you sign, you have to have them in separate folders. And all it meant for me was that I had to be a little bit more organized. And I had to have my team be a little bit more organized. So, okay, every NDA that we sign, fine, let's keep that in a data room. Name the file of the company that you signed it with, the expiry date of that NDA, so that you have it there at all times. Anybody that asks you for it, you just send them the folder, and then you're done.
Yeah, great. No, it's perfect. I think for a first-time exiting entrepreneur, this might be a huge step out of the norm, because you care so much for your growing your business, and then now you have to create this documentation. But actually, as you mentioned, it's more an effort of structure than anything else.
Yeah.
You also gave me some bullet points in terms of understanding contracts, earnout periods, invested shares. Maybe it's a good time to touch upon those.
What do you want me to share?
How does it change your, or not change, like change is such a hard word. How does, or maybe change your perception of being in the driver's seat, or as visually in the driver's seat, to being now aligned with corporate. What did it entail for you to properly understand the contracts and limitations also of your new role, as well as
I mean, honestly, from the contractual side, it's just some parts of it are experience. You read so many of these contracts, you just know what you have to pick up. And the other side is you talk to other people in the industry. You talk to people like Tiwa, people like AIM who've seen tons and tons of these contracts, and you ask them for advice. Like, what do you look for in a contract? What are the things you look for, here and there? There's so much resource and wealth of availability of other people who have been through this before. Speak to as many people as you can. Get a friend to recommend you to another friend that they might know, and have them read through your contract. Like, what's the big deal? What's the worst? You don't want to share them like numbers, then just scratch that part off or like block that part out and let them read through the rest of the contract. There are a lot of clauses that might surprise you or show up that um, you want to know beforehand. So I made sure of that the second time around, that to have everything documented and to see everything and run it through a bunch of people before I signed it.
Yeah, yeah, that's very good. Good
Yeah.
advice. Good advice, definitely. So at this point, I would like to invite the audience to ask questions. We have still 2 questions I have myself, but we would like to collect your questions as well. So please feel free to add them to the chats, whether on Facebook Live or in the webinar, and we will address them in a moment. I think it's a little bit tricky, but it's maybe not from your recent experience, because it was such a seamless flow that you had the investor already on board before they ultimately acquired Frank & Co. But like, how important is it to really understand the acquirer and their intentions in the process?
It's quite so. I mean, initially when like I said, when we first launching the product itself, right, with Nova founders and Pacific Century Group as the investors, it was very clear what their intentions were to do with the insurtech space. They really wanted to change it. They really wanted to invest in it so that we could start developing it, and they'd done it before. Now, look, the way they wanted to do it was not the right way. We sort of pivoted on that based on what the customer is wanting, and as long as you can prove that with data, that's perfectly fine. When you raise funding, right? No matter where you raise it from, you're always going to have a board of directors, and then eventually, any company, no matter what, if you raise enough funding, chances of you holding more than 50% of the company is going to be very, very low. And all that means is that you're going to have to convince the board and the people who you got to invest in your company to move in a certain direction. And most of the time, as the one operating the company, you can do that. But it's not every time that they're going to see eye to eye. So what you have to do is, you just got to convince them with data and customer facts, and take emotion out of it, as opposed to using gut feel, but use statistics, use facts, use numbers to prove it, because they're going to use the same thing. It's their money you're spending. They've invested in you and your company, so it has to be that way. Long term, though, I would say that no matter what the intention of an investor was in the beginning, that could always change with the times, that could always change with market dynamics, and that could always change with the change in investment mandate as well. So it's very hard to predict what their investment, what the investors, how do you put it, what their intentions are. It's very hard to predict that overall. You can just use your best guess and use your other people around them as well. Go in with your eyes open, speak to other people who've gotten funding from them before, how they work, how they operate, and do it that way.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think you mentioned a couple of things before, also like the imminent pandemic, basically that it was a relief for you to have the staff being taken care of, as well as in our prior conversation you mentioned that it's okay that once they acquired it, it's theirs too. So there's obviously some handling to their will.
Yeah, no, this comes with like yeah. So just to elaborate what you were saying, it's really like I was saying it to you earlier, right? When your company gets acquired, your first instinct is when somebody's trying to poke and prod this and that. They want to dig under the hood and open everything up and see what's this, what's that. Your first instinct is to be like protective of it because it's your baby, you built it. But you can't do that, and it's very hard. It's very easy to say now that you can't do that, and I'm still telling you that if I had to go through the same process again, instinctively I would probably still be very protective, because guess what? There are like when we first got acquired, the first 6 months was spent, sorry, the first 8 months of our company was spent being audited by everybody from the regional group that acquired us, by different departments, by the marketing department, by the operations department, by the risk department, by the finance department, by the tech department, by the C levels, by external auditors that they hired. We had auditors from Grant Thornton, we had auditors from E&Y, we had auditors from PwC, and all of them during the first 8 months digging in through every single thing, sometimes multiple times over and over again, to understand what was going on, where it was going on, why it was going on, whatever it was. And they would fly in and out of the country like almost every week, and every 2 weeks or so I'd have somebody new that I have to re-show everything all over to, because they just joined the company and they were new to this role, or they were new to that role at the group level, to come down and see everything. So you get very defensive of that. You sort of get very irritated at that as well, because it's like, okay, let me do my work. But then you realize that that is your work. That is now a part of your work. You have to tell these people what they've purchased, what they've bought. And you have to do it with open arms and open hearts, because if you don't, then when they go back and report, they're going to write in their report that, this company unknown, or this company structure here unclear, or not safe, or not, risky, or whatever it is. So it's very, so it was a very eye-opening process to go through.
I bet. I think this leads me to my personal last question, which is, can you actually prepare for it mentally or administratively during the prior growth phase and the getting ready phase to be there when you cross that finish line? To what kind of mental framework could help you to prepare you? Maybe a little bit of a philosophical question.
And I don't know, to be honest. I think, look, it's a state of mind. I don't know whether anything can prepare you or not, but I would recommend you get a personal, anyone who's going through this journey and who wants somebody to bounce ideas off, speak to other entrepreneurs, or get yourself a personal coach. There is nothing wrong with getting yourself a professional coach who can train you and talk to you and give you ideas or advice or another perspective. Look, I think a lot of these things is, as entrepreneurs, you sort of feel that you have to bear the burden yourself. And a lot of it is that way. Yes, you do have to bear the burden. You have to bear the decision yourself. But the burden can actually be bared by other people in terms of getting advice from them. The decision is ultimately yours, but you can always bounce it on multiple bouncing boards and multiple people. I remember calling up, for example, Tiwa from Kaidi at that time. I called up a few other people along the way, just to, my old co-founder, Ty, who works at a Central Robinson Group right now, just to get their ideas, to bounce things off of them. I met up with Paul and Tom at Arden and Ecommerce to just, to bounce things off them, to see what they were, how should I tackle this? How should I do this, do that? It helps. It really helps. And these guys are a lot more seasoned, so they're going to give you a different perspective. And all you can do is just get these different perspectives to make your final decision, because ultimately that's still on you.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Let me open the room for the questions. Karan had the first question from a professional background, I assume, is how are you adapting to the new privacy regulation and changes in technology landscape, like the depreciation of third-party cookies?
I'm adapting like it's mandatory, because if I don't, as a director of the company, I will be criminally liable for it. So, you better adapt. It's not I don't think it's a choice anymore. It's a mandatory thing, but it's just a matter of how we do it, and then do it in the most seamless way possible. So, there are great tools like OneTrust and a few other companies that you can use to help with that process. And I would certainly suggest you try to tackle it that way. But it's not a question of if, or it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yeah. He also asked one during our chat about team. He asked the question, how do you find good people in Thailand that fit within your company culture, and where do you find them?
Initially, when I have found people, I actually searched on LinkedIn myself. I didn't really go through headhunters. I actually went on LinkedIn. I looked at people's profiles and resumes, and I reached out to them on LinkedIn. I also used to snoop around their Facebook to see what the kind of personality that they had, and just based on poaching. It was honestly pure poaching, just looking on LinkedIn, actually outreaching to them personally on LinkedIn messages saying, hey, I found your profile very interesting. I'm doing the startup. We're starting from scratch, and would love to get you on board, just to hear, love to speak to you about it, to see if you'd be interested or not, and just meeting people. And once you get your core set of people on board, then you ask them to refer. Yeah, we did a big referral campaign. We offered everybody who offered, brought in somebody else 5,000 baht if they're able to pass probation.
We have another question from Sam, which is, what were some of the big differences you found between the e-commerce and the insurance customer acquisition funnel?
To be honest, I actually found it very, very similar. The biggest difference would probably be the closing of the customer itself on the insurance side. It's a lot more difficult for higher basket size items, right? For a physical product in the e-commerce space, you're talking about refrigerators, TVs, or these sort of high ticket items. Customers generally know what the brand is, know what the quality is, because they've seen it in a department store or they've seen the physical look and feel of it before. But on the insurance side, right, to try to sell somebody a coverage, which is a very abstract concept if you think about it, it is just literally an invisible protection that you can't see, you can't touch, you can't feel, or anything like that at all. So I actually took my learnings from the insurance side and from the e-commerce side. I tried to physicalize the product initially. I made insurance into somewhat a physical product by applying things that I saw in the market. For example, American Express. The fact that American Express is offering you a credit card, credit is also a very abstract thing. They're offering you a loan, which is nothing tangible, but they've physicalized it in a form of a card that they send to you in a beautiful box that makes you feel like you've got something of value. I took that same experience from e-commerce and applied it to insurance. So whenever I shipped an insurance policy to customer, I'd ship it in a policy box that looked beautiful, that looked nice, that was an experience for the customer to open, so they felt that they got something. In there is just documents which they normally got in a brown envelope that had nothing on it, and it's just a bunch of text, 20, 30 pages long that nobody ever reads. But when applying it this way, it helped customers feel like they purchased something that they could touch. So that really helped initially. So learning from e-commerce and applying to insurance, because insurance very early on, I realized that if it was not a person selling it who could actually try to convince the person buying it, I had to do something else to try to sell it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. I think that's a very good idea to give some more also haptical sensation of value, so to say, to something very immaterial like an insurance, which actually you pay for something you don't hope you don't need it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the rest of the customer funnel is pretty much the same. You're talking about marketing on Google, Facebook, you're buying keywords, you're building organic traffic. Yes, there are a lot more specific keywords you can choose to buy with insurance, and there's a lot less search volume, but the cost of buying those keywords are also a lot less than, say, Apple iPhone or Samsung TV.
Yeah. We have another question. What were the other exit options you considered or planned had the acquisition not have happened?
2018 towards the end, when we were at this stage, there were two options that we were considering. One was a management buyout and the other one was an ICO.
Okay.
Yeah, those were the two options, to be very honest. So it really stems back to the group of investors that we had to satisfy. So the reason that even we had to I didn't want to sell, nor did my co-founders want to sell, but we had to sell is because you were talking about intentions of the investors earlier on, right? Intentions change. The investors that we had, no founders at that stage, wanted to exit the company because they wanted to invest in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space. So their intentions changed, and they wanted to take whatever money was available, whatever they could liquidate quickly to get cash to invest in cryptocurrency, because they knew that they could get cryptocurrency 10x, 100x, 200x returns. So it didn't matter if they got $5 million, $10 million less valuation on this startup if they could 100x the money back on cryptocurrency. So their intentions had changed. So for us we had to find an alternative source of investment to satisfy their exit liquidity needs as well. ICO would have taken too long, and management buyout, we couldn't get the funds ready on time.
Okay, interesting.
We couldn't get the funds from other angel investors and from our own funds to buy it out on time, so we had no choice.
Uh-huh. Okay. That's quite it wasn't a very unexpected answer, ICO. and
It,
have.
it was it was hot in 2018, right? I mean,
Yeah,
honestly, look, in the insurtech space, I'm confident that if we had did it, it would have worked, because using blockchain with insurance, where you have to coordinate between agents, insurance companies, claims, garages. There's so many different parties involved here, and all required so much paperwork right now. It's ridiculous.
yeah. Maybe let's have like a fine. We have 5 to 10 more minutes, and let's have a look into the glass ball. Where do you see the insurtech or insurance sector going? Like, um,
Oh, it's a very very difficult question to answer. Honestly, I'm not able to predict the entire insurance industry, but I can tell you that where Bolttech is moving towards, like what we want to do is, we want to be more, as opposed to a distribution company where focused on selling insurance. We want to really take this platform that we've built and build on that platform further, because I think distribution comes with a lot of money, a lot of expenditures, and a lot of marketing that you have to spend on. But if you sort of build that platform further and sort of become like a tech company, that's the way to go. And that's where I want to be as well. Like my ideal company, I keep telling people, is like WhatsApp. When WhatsApp exited to Facebook, they had 50 people in the company, because that's all they needed. Because the platform they built was completely scalable. They didn't need customer service. They didn't need salespeople. They didn't need any of these things. No, they focused all 50 people on building an engineering team and building a platform as that was scalable. And that's what I really want to do for insurance.
Great, thank you so much.